Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Another week, another episode. This is Stats Over Politics. As always, I'm your host, Sean Holko. This week, I am joined once again by who has become a recurring guest on the podcast. I believe this is appearance number 4 for Mr. Keith Jouganatos. How we doing, my friend?
Yeah, appearance number 4, and it's funny because it took me about maybe a whole calendar year to get to appearance number 2. So now here we are, appearance number 4. Once again, we have the Diet Dr. Pepper. We have a lot of stuff to get into, and so we're happy to be here, and we're thankful to be here, and we're excited to talk about the shenanigans that sports have led us to down this rabbit hole this week.
Most definitely, and I'm grateful to have you alongside me. It's ironic to have you joining me here on the podcast. That Jaevon, Kevin, and I that we started with our friend Gary. We've been doing this now for 3.5 years, and what's ironic about it is that this week I got spotlighted for KSSU, the student radio, Sacramento State. They spotlighted me as their alumni of the week, which was pretty awesome. So I got to go into the studio earlier this week. First time on camp, like walking the campus at Sac State in like 6 years. So it was super nostalgic because I spent my last 8 weeks of college online from March 2020 until May 2020. And I'm grateful to have only spent 8 weeks online because there's plenty of friends that I have that they spent their last year of college online, like all of fall 2020 to spring 2021. And so it was really cool. But as it relates to you, my friend, is they asked me just about my experience on KSSU and everything that I did. And you came up a lot because I got to talk about To Be Debated that we used to host on KSSU. And I remember we always had TBD as the acronym. And I think when we first started it, it was To Be Discussed.
Yeah.
But then we kind of transitioned it over that year to Be Debated. And then when you stepped away from KSSU to pursue other opportunities, I hosted the Sean Holko Show solo. And so I don't know if you got a chance to see it on Instagram yet, Keith, but they posted a graphic of me today just for the alumni of the week. And your name is right on there because it's like he hosted To Be Debated with Keith Jouganatos. And so I'm grateful to have you joining me here on the podcast once again.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Well, first of all, congratulations. I haven't seen any social media at all today, given it's been a pretty busy day for both of us. But mentioning that brings back good memories. And somewhere in our show, there is at least 3 or 4 shows where I'm banging the table for Luka Doncic. So good times all around, and I'm happy about that. And I'm thankful that KSSU is still going, still thriving, and don't forget us little people now that they have mentioned you, and you are one of their favorite alumni. I'm just blessed to have been mentioned in the whole equation, so to speak.
Well, I'm just grateful to have been remembered among all the students who have been a part of KSSU within the last 35 years because they're about to celebrate their 35th anniversary coming up at the end of the year. And so, like when you and I first got onto campus at Sac State, they were celebrating their 25th anniversary. Now it's on to the 35th, so on and so forth. And so it was definitely an honor of mine. It was cool to go back into the studio. I was telling them about how when we first started, the studio was in the Union, not the Union. It is now in the Union. We were a part of that transition, but it started in the Well, and I even stepped foot in the Well with my friend Gary this past week, and saw how they had converted the former space that KSSU occupied into like an event center or something like that, and then I got to go into the studio in the Union, and I just remember it was such a big deal when we got to go from the Well to the Union as part of the big Union expansion. And now the Well is home to Sac State's basketball gym, which is pretty crazy. And so a lot of good things happening here in Sacramento, especially for us Hornets alums.
Where'd they get the money? That's my question. What did it all come after we left? Like did we put our deposit in? They took it and they just never put it back. I don't know, but happy for the Well and the Union and Sac State in general and our old radio station. So I love it. And when I get off here, I gotta take a look at that. I have to now.
Yes, sir. And it's funny that you say that because my older brother, who graduated like 10 years before me, he was saying some of the same things in regard to everything that we had as far as amenities on campuses. They were like, "Oh, we didn't have any of this. Now you got all this," and there's so much more now at Sac State, and so it was really cool to go back. But anyways, getting to today's episode of Stats Over Politics, number 185. I can't believe we're already at 185 episodes. Keith Jouganatos joining me here. Kevin Dent should be arriving soon. He's handling some family matters right now, or helping out a friend. And our guy, Mr. Jaevon Toddy, he won't be able to join us again this week as he is dealing with some personal matters that are ongoing. And so we have Toddy in our thoughts, and we hope to see him again soon. Hopefully Kevin's able to join us later in today's episode. But we're going to be going from the NBA to the NFL on episode 185. And so, Keith, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. As this news happened like a day or two. I think it happened the next day after we just had episode 184. And so it's not the freshest news, but it's historic because something like this has not happened in 20 years. And what I'm alluding to, if you might have been living under a rock or you're just not a sports fan, is Miami Heat center Bam Adebayo scored 83 points against the Washington Wizards, and how he got those 83 points was quite interesting. I believe the figure was 43 free throw attempts from Bam Adebayo, which is the most in NBA history for any player in any game. And so Bam scores 83. He surpasses Kobe Bean Bryant, who scored those 81 points in 2006 against the Toronto Raptors. And Jalen Rose always gets shit on saying like, oh, Kobe scored 81 on his head. No, he scored it on the entire Toronto Raptors roster, including Chris Bosh. But nevertheless, Kobe ranked second all time when it came to all-time scoring for a single game, only behind Wilt Chamberlain, who hit 100, and we're still waiting and trying to find
allegedly.
That footage. Yeah, we're trying to, or we see all this footage
we can
from
find everything but
Wilt's decades ago
footage,
but we cannot find footage of Wilt's 100-point game. It is just basketball lore. Nevertheless, Bam Adebayo, as he put on Instagram, Wilt, me, Kobe. That's the discussion that Bam Adebayo, of all people, has entered himself into, and good for him. But Keith, just what was your reaction to Bam Adebayo scoring 83 points in a single game?
So I'm gonna give you, for starters, where I was, how I found out, and then we can maybe get in. Oh, well, obviously we'll get into the opinion on the legitimacy or the reaction. Like any red-blooded American male, I go on Twitter. And all I see is bam, bam, bam. And I'm thinking, who's getting beat up? Like what's going on? Because right now in our country, you just don't know what an alien could fall out of the sky tomorrow and you'd be like, that's not surprising. But then I start seeing 80, 81, Kobe, and then Bam Adebayo, and it hits me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, something's happening here. Like there's something important that is going on. And thankfully, the NBA, as Mr. Adam Silver, you alluded to, wants us to get into the highlights portion of the league. It's a highlight league, so to speak. So you can go on Twitter. You can go on Facebook, Instagram. They had a live feed. So I get on just as he gets to the free throw line to pass Kobe's 81. And as he knocks down the first free throw, it hits me like a ton of bricks that somebody passed Kobe Bryant's 81-point game. I was about 13 years old when that happened in 2006 against the Toronto Raptors. But also it was, yeah. But also,
I muted myself. I'm sorry, Keith. I just wanted to interject real quickly to say I was 8. Keith's the old head.
Yeah.
I was 8. But
go ahead. Hey, listen. Hey, I'm getting old. I understand. But also it was the concept of like, not only is this happening, but of all people in the NBA, if you woke up that morning and you polled maybe 100 basketball fans, and you said, okay, Kobe Bryant's 81-point game is going to get shattered today, who's it going to be? Some might say SGA. We'll get to him later on in the podcast, right? He's a pretty big scorer. Some might say Luka would have gone crazy. Maybe Wemby would have just had one of those nights where the Spurs said, here it is. But the fact that it was Bam of all people, and Bam is a good player, but he's never been recognized as a premier scorer, let alone a guy that can get you 50, 60. It was just surreal. As a basketball fan, I found myself very much enthralled in the moment. As a sports fan, for me, it was just unheard of because I never thought anybody would ever get close to Kobe's 81. Like Wilt's 100-point game, to the day I die, I'm a firm believer no one's ever touching that in a regular basketball game in the NBA. No one's coming close to that. But the fact that he got 83, it was just surprising. I thought it was great for the game, in my opinion. I thought it created a lot of discussion. Now, whether that's positive discussion or negative discussion, we'll get into that surely. But I thought it was great to see it happen, maybe because of the sheer unexpectedness, but also because of the type of player and the player it turned out to be. Now, how he got that is a little controversial, so to speak, but I was just perplexed watching it unfold. And again, we live in a social media dominant world, and like in your line of work and my line of work, the reactions are like that. And so the fact that we were all there to witness it, whether you watched it in person in Miami, whether you were online, like I was on social media following the whole thing, I thought it was wonderful for the sport, but also in general for sports itself because of the sheer unexpectedness and the fact that it just came out of right field or off the bench, so to speak, and just was some guy that you would never have thought in a million years when you woke up that day that he would have dropped 80, let alone 70, and broke the Beans record. It was unreal to me.
Yeah, it was truly unreal. And since you recalled the moment that you kind of followed along, and it was definitely one of those moments where you will always remember where you were when that happened and just how you reacted to it. Because I'll just quickly recall where I was. So I was covering a girls' high school basketball game for West Coast Preps, my full-time job. I was in Yuba City at Faith Christian High School, and I was covering the Lions go back-to-back as Northern California champions. They did it in Division 4 this year when they did it in Division 6 last year, and they were led by the great Lauren Harris, who is the all-time leader in three-pointers for high school basketball, girls' high school basketball in the country. She is the all-time leader in three-pointers, which is a crazy statistic by itself, just following up on Bam with 83 points. But the point is that I was covering that game, and I looked down. I got a notification from, I think, ESPN, and it said, Bam Adebayo has 70 points in the third quarter. And I was like, 70 in the third quarter? Like, is he going to break Will Walker? Exactly. I was like, there's just no way. Like, was that a typo? Is someone doing a prank? Like, it's not April 1st yet. Like, what is going on? And then the game concludes that I'm covering, and I got a text from my friend Willie, who just said, did you see Bam just scored 83 points? And I was like, my brain exploded, because when I saw that number, 83, it automatically made me think about Kobe. And mind you, I just kept seeing the alerts and the information, but I didn't see how it happened. Then afterwards, when I got home, threw on Sports Center as I'm getting my recap done, and I just saw how it kind of happened. So that's what I want to lead into, Keith, before we get to our next segment, is I'm not really trying to diminish 83 points, because 83 points is remarkable. No one else has done it for a reason. I mean, we've seen Devin Booker, Luka all get in the 70s, but no one has gotten to 83. 43 free throws, that's a lot. It's a record too, but that isn't what bothers me so much as how that game transpired late, because the Heat were up by 20, 30 points in the fourth quarter against the lowly Washington Wizards, who were tanking until they get, I mean, Trae Young has made an appearance for the Wizards, but they're basically tanking out the rest of this year until they can try to roll out Trae Young and Anthony Davis next season. But the Heat were up 20 to 30 points in the fourth quarter, and Bam is still in the game. I get it. He's chasing history. Leave him in the game. But how he got there, and Bam's even saying with 2 to 3 minutes left, don't foul, don't foul, don't foul. His teammates proceed to foul, and they're fouling the Wizards. and then the Wizards are fouling him. And I don't know if the Wizards were
It's like a foul
necessarily
off.
intentionally. Exactly. I don't know if the Wizards were intentionally fouling Bam Adebayo, but the Heat were intentionally fouling the Wizards up 20 to 30 points just to try and give Bam more time and stop the clock. Just like you see in a clutch time game when it's in crunch time and it's less than 5 points with less than 5 minutes left, and the teams start fouling each other just to preserve the game and to give yourself a chance to still win the game, making the other team make the free throws to ice the game. But just the way that the Miami Heat organization, and this is mainly the players, and a lot of the players that were in the game with him at that point are the players at the very end of the bench who don't get very much run. And he's the star of the team, you could say. I would say Bam Adebayo is the guy over Tyler Hero in that organization. And so they're vouching for their guy, but it just didn't feel like an organic 83 points. Once I saw how the game ended and concluded, the 43 free throws, we can put that aside. It is what it is. But how they got to those 43 free throws, specifically in the fourth quarter, that's where I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, congratulations, Bam, but Kobe's 81 was more impressive to me personally.
The problem I have with this subject, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, because what would a podcast be, Shaun, if everyone agreed with each other? That's just not society. We won't try to play it like that. When did we, as a society, maybe we've always been this way, and the internet has just, I guess, amplified that. When did we as a society look at great things and just say to ourselves, no, that's not legitimate? It feels like nowadays we have to always either not decredit, but like just, I can't think of the word off the top of my head, but it seems like every time something happens in sports now, there's a 5-minute grace period until we go, no, that's not impressive. And this is 2026, so everyone has an opinion, right? I'm going to play devil's advocate. When Kobe had 81, he had 26 at halftime. Went crazy in the third. I don't know what number it was, but a majority of Kobe's 81, that side of the argument we'll have is, well, Kobe was knocking down jumpers. He was getting in the rack. They weren't calling as many fouls. And I've seen highlights. I can't tell you exactly how he got it, but he did have like a stretch of like 4 straight three-pointers when he did knock the 81 down. So, yeah, no one's knocking Kobe's 81 when we're defending Bam's 83. My problem is, when do we start blaming the Washington Wizards? Clearly, you are not trying to win. That's already bad enough as it is because the NBA has like 5 or 8 teams. And granted, this is a loaded draft, so I get it. That's just how literally how the ping pong balls bounce. But you've got like 5 or 8 teams in this league, night in and night out, that I don't watch, but I know because I see the highlights, and so do you, who legitimately are not trying to win. They're not trying to play competitive basketball. So what you had was the perfect storm. First of all, if you go back and look at the tape, Bam's getting hacked. By halfway through the third, he's getting triple teamed. He's getting fronted. He's getting face guard. He was getting fouled. So if we're going to acknowledge that the man had like 43 free throws in breaking this record, then can we at least acknowledge he was legitimately being fouled? And I love what Eric Spoelstra said. First of all, don't talk about credibility when we were playing a team that had no interest in being competitive, had it set in their minds, likely from the time that the ball tipped off, they wanted to lose. And listen, as maybe this sounds as bad as it is, it's not going to help my argument. If I have a chance at history, and I know this is an outlier, I'm not getting anywhere close to this. He hasn't come close to 80 since then, right? So, yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to get that record. I'm sorry. It is what it is. And I think part of the general public can still acknowledge that Kobe's 81 is impressive, but also, I don't care who you are, Shaun. You're not scoring 50 points in a regulated NBA regular season game that counts as one of the total 82. You're not scoring 50 just by accident. You're not scoring 5 in the NBA by accident. So what you have is a bunch of people, I feel like, who are trying to legitimize or discredit, a man's accomplishments who wouldn't score 1 bucket in the NBA. And you're going to tell me that an 80-point game is not, I guess, for lack of a better term, an impressive achievement. But also, you have a bunch of people, and I like to be, let's say, a little delicate with this situation. R.I.P. Kobe. Kobe was a great scorer, great player. No one would ever deny that. But you'll always have that group of people who will defend Kobe till the day they die. And I understand that's their hero. That's their, GOAT, so to speak, when they bring up this debate. But at the same time, I think you could give Kobe his flowers, but also give Bam his flowers, because Bam Adebayo is not known as a three-point shooter, and he just got hot. He was knocking down everything. Everything was going in, and ones, mid-ranges, drives to the rack. But when do we, as NBA fans, start to place the blame on some of this tomfoolery on the teams that have no interest in winning? Like, the Wizards have no interest in winning. I give Spo the credit for calling them out, but man, it was just a perfect storm. It lined up like perfect for something like this to happen, and it just so happened that the Wizards were the ones that he did it against, and that's just how it goes.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it makes me think back to earlier this season when the Miami Heat were playing at home and they played the Utah Jazz, who the Jazz were leading going into the fourth quarter, and then they benched Lauri Markkanen. They also benched a couple other players. I believe Walker Kessler was another one of them. I remember specifically that Lauri Markkanen was one of the players who got benched, and it's because I'm probably one of his biggest fans. He's the finisher. I am of Finnish descent from Finland. He's the first guy. Like, he's not the first Finnish NBA player, but he's the first one to actually make a huge impact. And so shout out to Lauri Markkanen. But I remember that game specifically because he was benched for the entire fourth quarter, and the Jazz still won that game in Miami. And then Bam Adebayo was the guy in the post-game press conference saying, "We lost to a team that's trying to lose. We have to find a way to beat a team that's trying to lose." And so for you to mention the Wizards in that context, I just find it so ironic, because they went from that to this, and now he's got 83 points. I guess they found a way to beat a team that's trying to lose.
Well, they weren't going to lose. That's for damn sure. They made clear of that. They made sure. I want to, if you can, go to Smooth's comment here, because I would have had a different feeling if he would have subbed himself out at 80 points. No one's doing that, Smooth. I love the engagement, but no, if I got 80 and I know I'm 3 points away, I'm doing whatever I can. But also the randomness of it, that it's Bam and it's not somebody like that's a premier scorer. That is just a chef's kiss right there.
Yeah, shout out to Smooth, who's always tuning in to the podcast. We appreciate you. That's Kevin's dad, and so we appreciate you engaging. As he also said, it was a little suspect. Analytics have gotten out of control. And to wrap this segment, I want to mention a statistic that I saw that I thought was quite interesting, because you look at so Devin Booker, he scored 70 points. How many points did he score in the next game? 23 points. Luka Doncic went from 73 to 28. Kobe, 81 to 30. Bam went from 83 to 21. But Wilt is just out of this world. He was out there dominating. I forget what the slight is always called. What do you remember what the white men in the 50s were like referred to?
Goons.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bomani Jones always references
cab drivers and like mailmen.
Yeah, there you go. The mailmen. That's what I was thinking of. For some reason in my head, I thought milkmen, but yes, mailmen. Because Bomani Jones, JJ Redick, they will always shit on the past and like who Wilt Chamberlain was competing against. But still, Wilt went from 100 to 58. So the drop off was not very significant between those two games. It's crazy.
When you're 7'1", 7'2", I don't care who you are. I mean, you could be like some of the most adequate NBA players in the world. You can't defend a guy 7'2" that can jump like 40 inches and runs like a 4.34. I mean, they never clocked him, but I'm sure Wilt wasn't like slow. He was on the track team at Kansas. That just genetics will take over in sports sometimes. It happens that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so now, Keith, let's move on to our other NBA topic, which is that expansion is incoming to Seattle and Las Vegas. And it's interesting. Kevin's going to be joining us in about 5 minutes, so we look forward to having Kevin join us pretty soon, and maybe we'll get his thoughts on this as well as a Sacramento Kings fan. Right now, we got 2 Sacramento Kings fans on the panel, and Kevin Dent is going to be joining us very soon.
Speaking of tanking, awful win last night for the Kings. Awful win last night for the Kings. What are we doing? We need to be tanking. That's what I'm just saying. I'm throwing that out there.
Well, last night the Kings got the brakes beat off of them by the Spurs.
Well, last night that was a good loss, but the night before we lit that thing. We need to.
Yes, exactly. The Kings won like four out of 5 games before Wemby came to town, and when you were talking about Wilt, it just made me think about Wemby, because Wemby is that guy of this generation now, and he can just go out there and straight up dominate. But when it comes to NBA expansion, this came from Shams Charania of ESPN on Monday morning, real early on the West Coast at 5:44 a.m. Pretty early, but not too bad if you live on the East Coast. So Shams says, Justin, the NBA will hold a vote at the Board of Governors meeting March 24th and 25th to explore adding expansion teams exclusively in Las Vegas and Seattle, with the 2 franchises targeted for the 2028-29 season. Sources tell ESPN. There's momentum for stakeholders to approve surveying what industry executives project will be bids in the $7 to $10 billion range for each team.
You take cash or credit?
You got it like that?
You maybe debit if you have if you hold it over, a little layover.
Right. You try to go get a loan. But the reason why I mentioned our Sacramento Kings fandom is everyone remembers, or most people remember, going back to 2013 when the Sacramento Kings almost moved to Seattle and became the Seattle Sonics. And Seattle fans, they've had to wait a really long time, but also Seattle fans, they now got the reigning Super Bowl champions. And the Seahawks have won 2 Super Bowls since they almost took the Sacramento Kings and made them the Sonics. But nevertheless, expansion is happening. The league is going to be just like the NFL now, going from 30 to 32 teams. We've heard rumors of Las Vegas for many, many years. The Golden Knights, actually, the Las Vegas Aces were the ones who started that trend, going from San Antonio Stars to Las Vegas Aces. Then you had the Las Vegas Golden Knights, an expansion franchise in the NHL. And now we have the Las Vegas Raiders going from Oakland to Sin City. So, Keith, between Seattle and Vegas, just what was your reaction to this? And does I think expansion was inevitable, but does it make sense for the 2 teams to go exclusively to these locations and not considering other destinations like a Nashville or something of that type?
Well, I was always under the assumption that the NBA was going to expand. That was going to happen. That's a given. When there's money, no billion-dollar corporation is going to turn it down. I don't care who you are or what you do for a living. So I knew Vegas would be one of the teams in the expansion because they've seen how that's worked out with the Raiders. And I hate to bring it up, but they're going to see how it is with your A's. Allegedly, we don't know yet, but allegedly, in Major League Baseball. I don't want to twist the knife. But
real quickly, I'll say the thing I always joke about with the A's is they are the Oakland / West Sacramento / Las Vegas Athletics.
I always like to call them now the artists formerly known as the Oakland Athletics. But you know, we can't use Sacramento in the name, I guess. But we're starting to use it on the apparel for now.
And I'm gonna get myself a jersey.
I didn't care about Vegas as a lifelong NBA fan, a man who has loved the National Basketball Association since I was like knee high. I have said from the beginning, The city of Seattle never should have lost their basketball team. There was a lot that went into that, and you can go into the politics. You can go into David Stern's vendetta with the city. Howard Schultz sold the team to Clay Bennett. Clay Bennett had no interest in keeping the Sonics in Seattle. He did them dirty. He moved them to Oklahoma City. It's worked out great. I like that for OKC. But as a fan of a National Basketball Association team that came this close to seeing his team leave, no matter how bad they are or how bad they have been, I would have hated to have seen that happen, not just for my generation, your generation, but for the generations after us who would have never understood what being a Sacramento Kings fan was all about. Let me put it to you like this. There's one team in the National Basketball Association that has won an NBA championship in the last, well, in general, there's one team that's won an NBA championship in the NBA that does not have their team. It's the Seattle Supersonics. They won it in 1979. They don't have their team anymore. And I have gone to Seattle. It's amazing. I love it there. If I could, I would work in Seattle in the news business. I love the weather. I love the culture. I love the city. I love the fans. I got to go to a Mariners game when I was over there. They're passionate sports fans. They know their stuff. They know their info. They love their Seahawks. They love their M's. They most definitely have always loved their Seattle Supersonics. Even when they left 30 years later, they still sell Seattle Supersonics gear in Seattle. They need their team back, bring back the culture, and I hope the NBA allows them to bring back every part. Bring back the gold and yellow. Bring back the old stats. Give them back their old stats. I know Oklahoma City technically owns it because that's their franchise, but give them back their Sonics. Hopefully they will in every capacity. I need them to bring everything back so they can bring back the Rain Man, Shaun Kemp, the glove Gary Payton, the smooth stroke of Detlef Schrempf. You know, we want the Seattle Supersonics back in Seattle. They never should have lost their team in the first place. And I have friends in Seattle, and I tell them all the time, listen, it's not that I don't want you to have the Sonics. I just didn't want you to take my team and make them the Sonics. So I'm glad that the NBA has learned their lesson, not just because of the financial aspect, but because it's great for the game. Those fans are some of the loudest in the NBA. You know, Shaun, I always think about how different life would have been if they had kept that core, Westbrook, Harden, Durant, and kept them in Seattle, because they would have had the money to keep them. Does the James Harden trade ever happen? Does the big three ever get broken up? These are big scenarios because of the luxury tax situation with Ibaka. But I'm just glad that the NBA has learned their lesson. This would have never happened, obviously, with David Stern, who was a known grudge holder. Great for the game, but a known grudge holder. Thankfully, the Sonics will return back to their rightful spot. Got to get the whole Eastern Conference situation figured out. One team's got to go there. But I think from a financial aspect, it's perfect. You got Vegas, you got Seattle, and it'll be great.
It will be great. And kind of like a WWE superstar, there's part of me that wants to go along with the gimmick and just continue to bash Seattle as a 49ers and A's fan. Just hating on Seattle, but I've actually traveled to Seattle a lot in the last 5 years, and it is a beautiful city. And so a man who resides in the Pacific Northwest, not in the state of Washington, but in the state of Oregon, none other, as he would say, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Kevin Dent is now joining us here on episode 185 of Stats Over Politics. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, man. Keith, just last week we were talking about how it's been so long to have you on, and now we're 2 weeks in a row.
Well, I told Shaun that, like, in one calendar year, I've made as many appearances as I've had in my entire existence. So by Halloween, we're looking at like 10, you know, the way this is going.
Hey, man, we're happy to have you. We're happy to have you. I was listening on the way here. I was helping one of my friends move. We took the couch to Goodwill, and they said, yeah, we're not taking it. So we have to pivot and figure it out. So now it's sitting in my garage. That's neither here nor there. Just wanted to explain to you guys why I was late. Talk about the NBA expansion. Seattle is crazy. Just like Keith was talking about, I went to Seattle for the first time in my life. I went as a child, but this time as a man, I got to experience the culture. I went the weekend of the divisional round. Yes, the divisional round, where the Niners lost in 13 seconds. Neither here nor there.
It's got a twist
But the Seattle Supersonics culture is real. Every store I went into, every sports store I went into, if I went to a coffee shop, they're selling gear. So this is a team that this is a city that really wants their team. And like Keith was saying, do they deserve to lose their team? No. Do they stay if they're able to build that culture, that big three, and maybe they ever win some championships? But unfortunately, they did have to go. Now, as far as Vegas goes, I think that's a money jackpot. They're going to have a baseball team. They have a football team just to see what the Vegas Raiders have done. It's going to take a lot longer of a time to really build a solid fan base. Just for example, I went to the the Rams-Eagles game 2 years ago, and it's all green because L.A., Vegas, they're such famous spots. They're getting a bunch of fans. Whether you're a Chiefs fan, whether you're an Eagles fan or a Rams fan, you're going to go because it's Los Angeles, because it's Las Vegas. So getting a place like Seattle, I feel like they'll have a chance to build more of a stability of a fan base because they already had a fan base there. When it comes to the Eastern Conference team that would leave, it would come down to the Pelicans, the Pelicans, Wolves, and the Memphis Grizzlies. I think it makes the most sense to move the Minnesota Timberwolves. We always talk about how the East is lacking talent. You get a guy like Anthony Edwards over there. People call him a superstar. Some people call him a top 5 player. Top 10 in my book. He's a certified superstar. Just to bring another superstar to the Eastern Conference would go a long way. And bringing the Minnesota Timberwolves to the Eastern Conference, they're automatically at Eastern Conference Finals, if not Finals contention every year. They made it to the Western Conference Finals twice. So everyone, I'm sure the three of us can agree that the West is a lot harder than the East. So if you're able to make it that close or that far in the West, just imagine what they would do in the East. I don't think taking a Memphis Grizzlies, who is in a middle of a rebuild, to the East, because we already have the Nets, we have the Bucks, we have a lot of teams already rebuilding. The Pelicans could be exciting. Depends on what you two think about Zion. I'm a Duke fan, so I think Zion is coming. We saw him play the most games. We saw him play the most games in his career this year. Consecutively, 40+ games. So if it makes the most sense to send the Timberwolves, but I can understand sending the Pelicans. I don't understand one bit sending the Memphis Grizzlies.
Real quick, I saw a Zion Williamson Duke highlight package on TikTok. Just seeing him now and seeing him then,
sad.
I would have thought he would have dominated for 10+ years. Just springing up, blocking shots off the glass, man. It was there, man. It was there. We saw it. It's like a meteor streaking through the sky.
Yeah, Kevin, I agree with you when it comes to moving Minnesota to the Eastern Conference. I completely understand your point when it comes to just competitive equity and the fact that the Wolves would be instantly contending for an Eastern Conference championship. And let's not forget, right now we're looking at Detroit as one of those contenders. To me, they're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals, but Michigan and Minnesota, they're very close next to each other. So it would only make sense to have Minnesota have to play Detroit 3 to 4 times a year in the Eastern Conference when realignment comes with this expansion. And so I would be a fan of that. It would definitely help the competitive equity to have Minnesota in the Eastern Conference, but just geographically too, it makes the most sense to me to have Minnesota move to the Eastern Conference. And when it comes to NBA expansion, Keith, you alluded to the fact that the Seattle Supersonics should come back and that the Oklahoma City Thunder should cede all the history to the new Seattle expansion franchise. And according to ESPN's Tim Bontemps and Bobby Marks, the Thunder would cede the Seattle history back to the Supersonics if a team returns to Seattle. So that's very important because we all remember as Sacramento Kings fans, when they almost took the Kings and moved them to Seattle, the talk was going to be they're going to be the Seattle Sonics, not the Seattle Supersonics, because at the time, Oklahoma City wasn't willing to cede the history back to them. But now with an expansion franchise, rather than moving another franchise to Seattle, it seems like Oklahoma City is more open to that idea. And before I give the rest of my thoughts on this, I wanted to highlight a comment from YouTube as Uncle Manny says, It's cool that Seattle and Vegas will probably get teams. I've been to Sonics games in Seattle, and it was awesome. Can Sac get a real team with a laughing emoji?
Don't do that, man.
Yeah, we would love to have an NBA team. Yeah, exactly. And to that point from Uncle Manny, it kind of makes me think about how Sacramento, we lost the Monarchs, our WNBA team. And I get it. Men's basketball is much more popular than women's basketball, even though the W and women's basketball in general, it's on the rise right now as we see college basketball translating to the WNBA. But I still think about the pain that I felt by losing the Monarchs and still feeling bitter that the Monarchs aren't coming back anytime soon. Vivek Ranadive said when he bought the Sacramento Kings that he was going to bring back the Monarchs, and he has not tried to do that.
He said a lot of things that have not come to fruition. Just put it to you that way.
Yes.
There's been a lot of things he says that have not happened.
Retweet.
Yes, exactly. And we have seen expansion in recent years in the WNBA, Portland, Toronto, and yet Sacramento is in Golden State, in San Francisco, the Golden State Valkyries. They have been an expansion team in the WNBA, but somehow Sacramento is never mentioned. So I'm happy for Seattle and all of their fans to be getting a team. I want to give a shout out to my friend Matthew's girlfriend, Ashley, who lives in Seattle. She's a diehard Seattle fan. And although it pained me to see her celebrating her Seahawks go on to win another Super Bowl at the expense of my 49ers, Seattle fans are loyal to the soil. They are great fans. And because the Golden State Valkyries were not a franchise until this past year when they were introduced to the league, I actually have traveled to Seattle quite frequently with my friend Matthew to go watch the WNBA because it all started in 2021 when we weren't sure if Sue Bird, one of the greatest point guards of all time in women's basketball history, and also Kevin Dent's close personal friend, I will remind everyone. But in 2021, we traveled up to Seattle, and we actually traveled to Everett, Washington, when Climate Pledge Arena was being remodeled to welcome the Seattle Kraken, the NHL expansion team. And so we traveled to Everett, Washington. The next year we came back because Sue came back for one more year. We saw her in her actual final year, and we've gone to plenty of Mariners games, Seattle Storm games, and all that fandom that Seattle has been missing with the Supersonics. They gave all that love to the Seattle Storm. And so it's been really cool. Seattle is very deserving to get an expansion franchise, and I'm really happy for them. I'm just glad that they didn't take our Sacramento Kings. And the other side of the coin being Las Vegas. When it comes to my Oakland Athletics eventually moving to Vegas, when the news initially came out, I was very angry about it. I still am angry. I wore a Sell shirt to the gym today, which was for the A's needing to be sold from John Fisher. That shirt can also apply to Vivek Ranadive and the Sacramento Kings at this point. But the point being is that I initially was not happy at all about the A's moving to Las Vegas. And I always said, if the A's actually leave California and go to Las Vegas, I'm not going to be a fan of the franchise anymore. But that changed in this past year when I started dating my girlfriend, Allie, who has family who live in Henderson. And in the last year, I've traveled out to Vegas probably 4 or 5 times, and I've actually gotten to see Vegas outside of the tourist perspective. And Vegas will do very well when it comes to the NBA. As Kevin was saying, it's going to be a major moneymaker. And my biggest point to it is a couple times as I've gone out to Las Vegas to visit Allie's family, I have been on a flight with several Raiders fans, but I've also been on a flight with other NFL fans because Las Vegas has become a destination weekend for NFL fans. Kevin, have you ever traveled out to Vegas to see the Eagles or not? Not yet.
So the only time I got to see the stadium was during COVID. So I didn't really get to get the full effect. It was the first year they were open. So I didn't really get to get the full effect, but I mean, I've been to Allegiant Stadium and it looks amazing. And I've been to Vegas since, just driving by and seeing the culture. They're slowly starting to become Raider Nation, the black hole like we used to know in Oakland. But like I said, it's going to take a long time for that because a lot of the kids there have never had a football team to support.
Exactly. And to Kevin's point that he made about SoFi Stadium, otherwise known as Levi's South, anytime the Eagles travel to SoFi to play the Rams or the Chargers, the entire crowd is green. And that's basically what you see in Las Vegas. And I'm sure that will end up happening with the expansion franchise. I'm also sure that there will be plenty of fans who become fans of the Las Vegas team, but that's going to be outnumbered by the established fans for many years to come. And it may not be a destination weekend, but maybe it'll be a destination week, so on and so forth. And so there are going to be fans from all over the country wanting to go to Las Vegas to see their team play there and then go participate in all the antics that Las Vegas presents. And so to me, this is a home run. Nashville is a trendy city right now, and there's other cities that may want an NBA franchise, but it makes the most sense for Seattle and Las Vegas to get these teams. And so it's a good decision, in my opinion, and we shall see how it all ends up turning out. But the Sonics are finally coming back, and so congrats to all the fans in Seattle. This might be the best year ever for everyone in Seattle, from the Mariners making it to the American League Championship Series, to the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl, and now the Supersonics are officially coming back. I'm sure that this has just been amazing for everyone up in Seattle. As we keep things moving here on episode 158 of Stats Over Politics, Sean Holko alongside Keith Jouganatos. Kevin Dent just had to step away for a moment, but he is back now. So, Kevin, if you could you please administer our final NBA segment for us?
Yes. So, as we all know, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander broke Wilt Chamberlain's 126 games of 20 points in a row. This now I've been seeing a lot of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander conversations that I don't know if he really deserves to be in yet, but there's a lot of conversations where you can say, maybe he deserves to be there. So I felt like this was a perfect time to do a this or that based off the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander streak. So when I tell you guys these names, I want you to think about them in their absolute prime. So first name, James Harden.
That's tough. The king of the step back.
No, it's not.
Man.
No, it's not.
Oh, to me, that's tough.
I think I'm going to take SGA. I know James Harden was more of a three-point shooter. Is either 3 points or the rim, but SGA can do all three. And he's efficient. James Harden was a shot chucker. But like I said, the step back was famous. He made the Euro step re-famous. But SGA does it efficiently. And in this modern day of basketball, doing it efficiently at a high level goes a long way. So I'm going to go SGA.
Yeah, I'll make it unanimous, and I'll go SGA as well.
Next name, Dwayne Wade.
Ooh, Flash. Well, Dwayne Wade, to my knowledge, if I remember correctly, never won MVP, so I'll go with Shai because of that.
I just want to throw this out there. People give Shai a lot of flack for the foul calls. If this generation had been alive for the 2006 NBA Finals, with the calls seemingly that Wade was getting in those finals against the Mavericks, they would have rioted in the streets. But I will go SGA for the longevity and the durability aspect. Wade, phenomenal three-way scorer, but by the time he had gotten to the early 2010s, the body was starting to break down.
Yeah, the injuries definitely play a huge factor into this. Next name, Kawhi Leonard.
I will take peak Kawhi. If you put injuries aside, I will take peak Kawhi, because Kawhi is the same guy like that when the Spurs were still the Spurs. Yeah, they were old, but the Spurs were still the Spurs, and he emerged as the best player in those 2014 NBA Finals, so much so that he went on to win Finals MVP, and he beat the Heatles just like the Mavericks did. And I don't know, man, this is really tough. You're giving us so many good names, Kevin, but I'll go with Kawhi just to switch things up.
I'm going to go Kawhi as well. Shai's not a bad defender by any means. Led the NBA in steals last year, so he's a very good defender. But prime Kawhi, I mean, he came to Toronto, told everybody he didn't want to be there, and took him to a championship. Kawhi Leonard is the same guy that could have if it wasn't for Zaza Pachulia stepping under his shot, there might not be a Warriors dynasty. Like, he was playing that well up to that point, and the Kawhi got hurt. The Spurs ended up getting trampled by the Warriors. So I'm going to go Prime Kawhi. Prime Kawhi is a different breed. What about you, Keith?
I'm going to go SGA.
I'm not mad at it.
I am going to go SGA just for the simple fact that I feel like there's more. If I'm going with Kawhi Leonard, I would base it off the concept. It's the overall game, right? Like, Kawhi is a great scorer. But also when we talk about Kawhi, we think, okay, he's a great scorer, but also he can defend the basketball. When he was in his prime, he was an all-around player. But if I needed one guy to get a bucket, I mean, I'd probably go with Shea in that regard, scoring-wise. If it's player to player, I would pick Kawhi in his prime, but I have to go with Shea just because if I need a bucket, I'm more prone to go that road.
Okay, so now that we got the bucket getters out the way, Chris Paul.
Give me Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, I love Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guards of all time. But if I need a guy to go out there and win me a game, it's going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, not only with his scoring, but also his playmaking and distribution. All love to Chris Paul. It's fucked up what the Clippers did to him, but I'm taking SGA.
I'm going to go SGA as well. I know Chris Paul back in his day was a defender. But the game's different now. Back then, you were able to be a 6'1" point guard and be able to stay on the court. Now, 6'1" point guards get played off the court. Now we have the 6'8" LaMelo Balls of the world. So I'm going to go SGA just because he's a better overall player. Yes, I know the defense isn't all there. He's never going to probably make an all-defensive team like Chris Paul did in his prime. But SGA is a different breed. So I'm going to go SGA. What about you, Keith?
I would contend – because there's a lot that it's not the subject. I'm going to go SGA, but was it wrong how the Clippers did Chris Paul at the end?
Yes.
Because there's a lot that went into that. It wasn't it wasn't as black and white as you think it is.
Keith, he was the best player in franchise history.
I get that.
Jersey's going to be in the
so
Raptors.
wrong.
I get that. But you are what the rule says you are. I'm not talking about yesterday. I'm talking today. Today, we said you are coming off the bench. If you come off the bench and you are going to be a mentor, you are not the franchise player today, Chris Paul. I get what he did was great, but there was a lot of people who had enough. And I kind of don't blame him in that regard because your role is your role today. If I play the clarinet today, it's not about I was a world-renowned saxophonist like 5 years ago, Shaun.
Okay, but I know that this is relatively a quick segment, so Kevin, I'll just get this out quick. I mean, if you knew that's what you want Chris Paul to be, and he knew that's what he was going to be at this point in his career. We saw him, he started from time to time in San Antonio, but he knew this is what it was going to be in his career. The problem with Chris Paul with the Clippers this year is that he was still the same Chris Paul when it comes to being a locker room leader and voicing himself. And the Clippers could not handle that. They were folding under pressure at the beginning of the season. That's what led to James Harden becoming a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was so wrong. Like, I thought what they did to Blake Griffin was wrong, where Steve Ballmer buys the team and he says, we're going to retire your jersey. And 6 months later, he got dealt to Detroit when Detroit was purgatory. And then they do this to Chris Paul in his final year of his career. He should have retired a San Antonio Spur, but he wanted to go back to where he really cemented his legacy, which was in LA with the Clippers. He dragged that franchise from being absolutely mediocre and trash for years into being a perennial playoff contender. And I get that they never made it to the Western Conference Finals with Chris Paul on that team, but the way that they did him in his final year absolutely fucked up. They said, go home. You can remain on the roster. We don't want you here. That is the epitome of disrespect. And you cannot convince me otherwise. We can agree to disagree, but it was so foul. And I'll leave it at that. He's a future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest point guards of all time.
The one thing we can agree on is that the whole Ty Lue legacy is a little iffy. The last 5-6 years is a great coach.
Without LeBron James.
Yeah. this is on shaky ground. The way some of this has gone with the revolts and the way the ship has been sailed by Ty Lue. Yeah.
All right. So the last name of the this or that is Kevin Garnett.
Ooh, man, people forget about Prime KG, Minnesota Timberwolves
Garnett.
KG.
I'll take Garnett in a heartbeat.
I'll take Garnett too. I mean, I think
I'll Kevin Garnett as well.
Garnett put up like 70, 80 in a high school game.
People forget about the Timberwolves Garnett. That's when he didn't have to leave to become a household name. Like they weren't winning games, but he was still Kevin Garnett. So that's gonna do it for the this or that shade.
You don't have to convince a Kings fan about Prime Wolves Garnett. We know all about Prime Wolves Garnett.
Yeah, what was that, Keith? Keith, you're the old head. Was that 03 when Garnett torched us in the playoffs? Or
04? 03 was when Weber tore the ACL and Nick Van Exel just got on an all-time heater for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well,
what a time.
There it is. As we keep things moving here on episode 185 of Stats Over Politics, Sean Holko alongside Keith Jouganatos and Kevin Dent. We got a couple more segments, guys, and now we shall transition to the NFL. As last week on episode 184 of Stats Over Politics, we were talking about our reactions to the Maxx Crosby trade as he got dealt from Las Vegas to Baltimore for 2 first-round picks. And we all remember what the trade was, and it quickly fell apart as the Raiders traded Maxx Crosby to the Ravens in exchange for a 2026 and 2027 first-round picks. But the thing that even Bleacher Report said on March 6th when they announced the news is the trade cannot be processed until next week. Well, there's a lot of things that happen in that next week. And if you haven't heard Maxx Crosby's podcast recalling what happened, check it out because it's quite entertaining. Nevertheless, on March 10th, 4 days later, the Raiders social media platform put out a statement where it says simply, the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of our trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. We will have no further comment at this time. And everyone's heads just started exploding. It was crazy. And forgive me to the audience if my connection is not the best right now. I apologize. Hopefully I can make it through the rest of this episode. I used to have Xfinity Wi-Fi. Now I have AT&T Wi-Fi. It is cost less, but it makes a dramatic difference in our show. And so I apologize to the listeners for that. And hopefully I'm not too buffering throughout the rest of the episode. But the thing that was interesting is apparently the Ravens doctors saw Maxx Crosby's surgically repaired knee that he's currently recovering from. And they said, we have concerns. I don't know about this. And I don't believe this statement but he said, after losing their starting center, Tyler Linderbaum, to the Raiders, they were interested in pairing together Trey Hendrickson and Maxx Crosby, but Crosby's medical exam put an end to that discussion. I do not believe that at all, because I think that once they realized that they could just sign Trey Hendrickson outright and not have to give up 2 first-round picks to get Maxx Crosby, who is an extremely similar player, that they were like, his knee, that's a concern of mine. We're not doing this anymore. And they got cold feet. That's what I feel. But Kevin, how about you? What was your reaction?
I felt the same way. I have a lot of friends that are Ravens fans, and they're like, Kevin, it's not his knee. We got a better deal, A, B, C, and D. This is bad business. Any team trading with the Ravens is going to have they're going to have to look at their eyes. They're going to look at them and be like, is this really what we want to do? We just saw what they did in Maxx Crosby. This was the trade of the offseason. Like, this was the blockbuster trade we hope to see every offseason. And unfortunately, they backed out of it. And you sit here and you wonder why. If you, like Shaun mentioned, if you listen to the podcast, he mentions that his doctor said his knee is fine. Like, he's still on track to be ready for training camp, and that was always the goal. So with everyone being on the same page but the Ravens, makes you raise an eyebrow, because Maxx Crosby talked about he went there and he didn't even get to see the head coach. He didn't even get to see the GM. Like, the GM is the dude who traded for him, and he didn't even get to meet the GM. So it's like he got there, he was already like, this kind of feels weird. For a guy like Maxx Crosby to be somewhere for so long, be such a loyal guy, to kind of go through those emotions of, I'm no longer a Raider. I'm moving on. Thank you, Raider Nation. 48 hours later, you're back to being a Raider. So how does this fall out with the team? Because obviously he didn't want to be there, and now he's back. So I know a lot of Raider fans that were looking forward to having those 2 first-round picks, maybe getting a Mekhi Lemon, a Jordan Tyson, add another skill receiver to the duo or to play for Fernando Mendoza. So the Raiders were doing a lot of things, making a lot of moves. We talked on here last week about how much we loved their free agency, and now how they get to add to that free agency with 2 first-round picks, one being Fernando Mendoza, hopefully a franchise quarterback, and then a Mekhi Lemon, like I mentioned. You can go out there and get a Jordan Tyson. Like, there's a lot of things that they could have done with that 14th pick. But for the Ravens to just pull the carpet from under us and say we were going to get Henderson anyways, I don't really think that's the truth. But neither here nor there. He's back to being a Raider, and they have said they're not going to trade him. I don't think that either. But I know that his value has really diminished. But like I said, if the doctor is telling you you're fine, I think we're going to trust your doctor. He's not going to sit out here and lie to you. He's not going to lie to the Ravens sports analytics team, not analytics, but the sports team. Like, he's not going to lie to them. So if he thinks he's okay and he's the one who did the surgery and saw inside his meniscus, I think his opinion is more than just what MRI says. So Ravens, bad business, and karma's a bitch. So hopefully he doesn't come back around, and in an injury perspective, but, just them continuing to be the Ravens in the postseason. So I feel bad for Maxx Crosby.
Keith, I'm really interested to hear your perspective on this as a diehard fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who obviously reside in the AFC North, because not only are the Ravens not getting Maxx Crosby now, but they're getting Trey Hendrickson and taking him from another AFC North team. So what was your reaction to all this news?
You're muted.
For a second, I thought that was just me, and so I wasn't saying anything. Keith, we cannot hear. Yeah, we cannot hear you, unfortunately, Keith. From what I'm seeing on the producer panel, your mic is not muted through StreamYard, so maybe you will need to figure that out as I try to stall. But unfortunately, Keith is still dealing with some technical difficulties right now.
Yeah, I got something to talk about. I think it's crazy that you sign with a division rival. We saw Nakobe Dean come out here and say, yeah, I'm not going there. Like, it's crazy to think. I mean, I get it. The Bengals are a piss poor organization. They don't ever do anything to make the winning moves. But to go to your division rival and twice a year, you're good. So twice a year you got to play them, and then once a year you got to go to Cincinnati. So I think that was absolutely just fucked.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Before we, sorry, Keith. I was just going to say, but before we hear Keith's much anticipated take on this, I just wanted to add on to what Kevin said, is how the Bengals treated Trey Hendrickson and how they played games with him. That's exactly why he is going to their division rival and going to their most competitive division rival. No slight to your Pittsburgh Steelers, Keith, but time and time again, the Ravens have been that perennial playoff team in the AFC North up until this past year. And so, Keith, as a Steelers fan, what was your reaction to this news of the Ravens backing out of the Maxx Crosby trade with the Raiders, as I just realized I need to fix the ticker?
Well, the idea of Crosby on the Ravens, Myles Garrett on the Browns, Hendrickson was going to be gone regardless after that, and I'll get into that in a minute. I felt bad for Joe Burrow. That's the first person I thought of when I thought of this whole situation. It's like everyone's getting these, top tier pass rushers, and Joe Burrow is like, pray for me, but at least I'm going to have fun and go hang out with Jessica Alba at the crap stable. So, but nonetheless, if I'm playing devil's advocate, so with the situation surrounding Maxx Crosby, I am going to have the mindset that the Ravens got cold feet. First of all, this notion that Maxx Crosby was not injured or that the Ravens were caught by surprise on some physical, that's not true. The Raiders, made it clear to every single team that was vying for Maxx Crosby, he's dealing with a torn meniscus. He's injured. Everyone knows Maxx Crosby has the torn meniscus. Now, if we're breaking this down, I'm just going off the facts here. He underwent surgery to repair the meniscus in 2026. Now, initially, it was thought he would just need a meniscus trim. Now, what's the difference? A recovery for a meniscus trim is a lot faster, obviously, than repairing a torn meniscus and going in there and getting surgery. A trim allows a player to recover more quickly than a repair. However, the problem is that with the trims, a lot of teams believe it creates more complications down the line. It can shorten careers. Now, meniscus repairs, total meniscus repairs, they require longer recovery times, but they're more likely to produce a stable knee and fewer long-term deteriorations. So if I'm playing devil's advocate with the Ravens, I think they liked the idea of having Maxx Crosby become a Raven for 2026. What they didn't like was the concept of giving Maxx Crosby $70+ million and then having to deal with potentially a guy that's making that kind of money and the knee, the meniscus more specifically, is not stable. So I think, Shaun, you alluded to this. Once they realized they could probably get Trey Hendrickson at a discounted rate, a motivated Trey Hendrickson, because obviously the Bengals and him have just been really apart, they said, okay, let's take the trigger. Now, obviously, Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, they're two of the most elite pass rushers. But if I'm the Ravens, I look at it like this. Trey Hendrickson, all-pro in 2024, led the NFL with sacks, 17.5 that same year. He ranked second in overall pressure with 13.2% since the Bengals signed him from New Orleans in 2021. He had 61 sacks since 2021. That's the fourth highest total out of anybody in the league. Now, the case against him is last year, obviously, he ended on IR after that procedure to repair the core muscle injury. He only played in 7 games last year. But at the same time, what is the risk and reward? What are we comparing? If we're comparing two guys that have been hurt the last couple of years, I mean, I'm not a doctor. No one is. But I would think that repairing a core muscle injury could be a lot easier than a torn meniscus. And then the other thing that Kevin alluded to that goes into this, when they realized we're about to give up the 14th pick in this year's draft, that's not like just some throwaway pick. That's the 14th pick. There's a lot of people that are in play there. You know, you don't know, like Hakeem Mesidor could be there. Jordan Tyson, we've talked about on the podcast. Mekhi Lemon could be there. But also, you could package that pick, and I hate to talk about a Buckeye, but you could package that pick, move up in the draft if he falls a little bit, and get like a Caleb Downs or a Sonny Styles, who ran a great pro day and a great 40s time. And you could bump up in the draft because there's going to be a lot of defensive players in this draft that are of high caliber. So you weigh the risk of giving a guy that's already has a bum meniscus, so to speak, that kind of money, as opposed to taking that draft pick. And if that draft pick hits, man, that's valuable for the Ravens because you're getting that guy on a rookie contract as opposed to shelling out $60 million for the next 3 to 4 years for Crosby. But again, you know, I just think they got cold feet when they realized what they were about to give up. They just said, hey, we got to pull the trigger. We can't pull the trigger right now. And I think as much as they would have loved to, the money aspect, the injury aspect, it just wasn't worth in their minds taking that risk.
So what are we going to say if Maxx Crosby goes there and has an all-pro season?
Depends on how Trey Hendrickson does, because I really think that Eric DeCosta was lying straight through his teeth about pairing them up. And so it's going to come down to the comparison, just like we see in the NBA with Luka Doncic and Trae Young after their draft night trade. And so I really think it depends on how Trey Hendrickson performs. If Trey Hendrickson comes out and has a bad year, or he gets hurt and Maxx Crosby balls out, then we're going to hear about it a lot more. But if they have fairly equal seasons, then I think it's kind of a wash. Well, real quickly, before we get to our last segment, since Keith mentioned the Ohio State Buckeyes, Kevin, I'm going to do this just to spite Keith because he's a Wolverines fan. OH?
I-O?
Yes.
Hey, are you guys gonna win tomorrow?
Yes, they are.
Well,
I
they
know
should beat
you're in that
TCU.
8-9.
Wait,
I know
is
you're
it
in that
Thursday?
8-9, that tricky matchup with TCU. So I don't know how it's gonna go for you.
Doesn't everything start
Keith-
Thursday? Or they start playing tomorrow.
Thursday. Tomorrow's
Tomorrow's
Thursday.
Thursday.
Oh shit.
You guys don't even know
Kevin
when you're
lost
playing.
track because we're
We
usually
had a
doing this on
conversation.
Mondays.
We had a
Dude,
conversation
I'm-
about Ohio State. You guys don't even know when you're playing.
Dude,
Hey,
I
leave us
thought-
alone.
Dude, I've been all over the place today. You know what we
No,
forgot?
I
We forgot
totally
the
got you.
stats of our politics bracket.
Yes, we need to do that. I'll try to put something
You think
together.
we could rally? Because the first game is like what, 10?
Shoot, it'll have to be a quick rally. Keith sent me a link to his bracket challenge, which is just for bragging rights. So Kevin, I'll have to pass that link along to you and Toddy.
You guys
Please.
want to
At
join the
least-
North State News' bracket? You can join
Yeah,
KRCR Channel 7's bracket in Chico.
The four of us can join Keith's news channel bracket. Just so
We're
the
gonna
four
make
of
you
us
and
can
Kevin
all compete
honorary
together.
producers of the of the station now.
We appreciate you as we start to wrap up here on episode 185 of Stats Over Politics. Sean Holko alongside Kevin Dent and Keith Jouganatos. Guys, we got one more segment, and it's NFL related. And this was about a trade that actually did happen. And that was that the Dolphins traded Jaylen Waddle, their star wide receiver, to the Broncos. So the Dolphins go from having two speedy wide receivers in Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle to now, starting next season, they likely will not have either of them. I believe, off the top of my head, Tyreek Hill, he technically still is a Dolphin. That hasn't ended yet.
No, they let him go. They released him.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it because I was kind of just thinking out loud, but I remembered, yes, and that's when he said thank God or whatever. Anyways, okay. So I kind of contradicted myself there, but nevertheless, Dolphins go from having two speedy wide receivers to now having none after releasing Tyreek Hill, trading Jaylen Waddle. And so, according to Adam Schefter, the trade is official. The physical has been passed. That's important context after what happened with Maxx Crosby, as the Dolphins have acquired a 2026 first-round pick, which is 30th overall, and a 2026 third-round pick, 94th overall, and a 2026 fourth-round pick, 130th overall. So, without getting into the details of exactly which picks, a 2026 first, third, and fourth from the Broncos in exchange for wide receiver Jaylen Waddle, and a 2026 fourth-round pick, which is 111th overall. So basically, they swapped 2026 fourth-round picks. The Broncos moved up 19 picks, but they also traded their first-round pick, which is number 30, completely different than number 14, as we were talking about with the Ravens, and also a 2026 third-round pick. So, Keith, I'm going to toss this to you first. What was your reaction to the Dolphins trading Jaylen Waddle to the Broncos?
I was a little surprised given the context that Malik Willis had just gotten there. Obviously, they had gotten rid of Tyreek. They were going to need as much ammo as possible. Now, they have come out and said that Achane is not going to be traded. Adam Schefter did report that today. They are going to keep Devon Achane. He's not going to be traded. For the Broncos, I was not surprised because obviously, Bo had gotten hurt in the divisional game against Buffalo. He did not play in the championship, but the offense lacked juice when it came to the deep ball. Now, the Broncos obviously wanted to add another vertical threat. Nix was an 83.1 total QBR on deep throws. That ranked 19th out of 28 qualifying passers last year. He ranked 24th on 11.6 yards per deep attempt. So a lot of that has to do with maybe the lack of resources. Now, they do have guys that are stepping up like Troy Franklin. Cortland Sutton will likely be the second number one in that regard. But Jaylen Waddle has averaged 15.6 yards per deep target over that same time. He hasn't come close since 2022 to replicating the 1,300-yard season since. He hasn't had 1,000 yards receiving or more in the 4 years since he has had that season. A lot of that has to do with the concept that Tua has been inconsistent. The offense hasn't been as fluid. They were game planning for him. But I think the Broncos obviously wanted to add a larger deep threat. And again, he can fly, man. If there's one thing Jaylen Waddle can do, he can run and he can get open. And I think Sean Payton is going to really, obviously he's not calling the plays anymore, but I think he'll tinker with the concept of getting Jaylen involved. They're going to want to have bigger plays down the field. They're going to be in a division where you have to score points. That's just the way it's going to be. They're going to have Kansas City still there. I still think the Chargers will have a boom season next year. That's for the NFL preview down the line. But they're going to be in a division where you got to throw up points. And that's just the simple route of it. For the Dolphins, obviously, they're probably going to try to tear this thing down. And they're going to try to rebuild. I think Stephen Ross has it in his mind. They're going to probably look at the layout, of their division, let alone the AFC. Bills are still relevant. Patriots obviously have gotten better. The Jets are the Jets, but they need to tear this thing down. Now, they have Malik Willis. I think Malik will have a good quality span for them. Now they're bringing in all these guys from Green Bay who have seen this guy come to work every year. But I think the Dolphins are the mindset. We need to get as many picks as possible. We need to see and rebuild and get younger. So I like what the Dolphins are doing because they're tearing down that old part of what they once were, and they're trying to establish a new identity. And I think getting a second and a fourth for a guy like Waddle was a really good call for them going forward.
I agree. And Kevin, before I get your reaction, I just wanted to mention the impact that Jaylen Waddle. I have Tyreek Hill on the mind after my mistake, but 5 years in Miami for Jaylen Waddle after being drafted out of Alabama. He had 5,039 receiving yards, which ranks 6th in franchise history, 373 receptions, which ranks 8th, 26 receiving touchdowns, ranks 8th again, and he had the most receiving yards by a Dolphin in his first 5 years of his career. So he definitely left a legacy down in South Beach. But what was your reaction to this trade, Kevin?
You guys think they told Malik Willis they're going to blow the shit up?
Shit, I think he didn't care because he was getting paid.
Yeah, the money.
He would have got the money anywhere. He could have went
check
to
cleared
Arizona.
the same way.
He could have went to Arizona. He could have played for the Jets. Like I mean, I know we're talking about the bottom of the bottom, but it's like Malik Willis. So it's Malik Willis, Devon Achane, Malik Washington, Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell, and Greg Dulcich. This team isn't gonna be good, and we all watch college ball. You're telling me if they get a top 3 pick, they're going to turn away from an Arch Manning, a Julian Sand, Dante Moore, Lenora Sellers, DJ Lagway, CJ Carr, Brendan Sorsby? Like, there's a lot of quarterbacks coming in this class. And this might bite Malik Willis in the ass because he could play good and they just suck. But they look at a guy with a rookie contract and say, we're already rebuilding anyway. Shaun just mentioned they want all these picks. So what is this going to look like if they go 2-15, 1-16?
It'll be interesting, but I do think the reason why he decided to go to Miami is not only to get paid, not only because of the location that he's now in, going from frigid Green Bay to now very warm Miami, but also I think that just his familiarity with all the Packers personnel that moved down south to Miami, including the Dolphins' new head coach. I feel like that's the reason why, is because he already had that familiarity with working with all of them in Green Bay, but then also like he was their guy and he was their primary target in free agency, and they probably made him feel wanted and desired. And so that's why I think that Malik Willis ultimately decided to go to the Dolphins. On the Broncos side of things, a team that made it to the AFC Championship game, as Keith was talking about, as they will compete in the AFC West. I'm really happy for the Broncos. This is a great move for them. Courtland Sutton, he really emerged, but now for him to play alongside a Jaylen Waddle, this Broncos team, they're going to be right back up there in terms of not only competing in the AFC West, and I think that the AFC West is going to come down to the Chargers and the Broncos again this year. And the only reason why I'm sleeping on the Chiefs is it depends when Patrick Mahomes is going to come back. And as we know, it's very well noted on this podcast, I'm the president and founding member of the Justin Fields fan club. He was traded to the Chiefs this past week for a swap of 7th-round picks. And I was very happy about that move for Justin Fields. But Justin Fields isn't going to lead the Chiefs to the playoffs. He's a placeholder for them until Patrick Mahomes comes back. And so it'll be interesting to see how Jaylen Waddle performs on the Broncos. But it was time for a fresh start. It was time for the Broncos to really make a big move like this to contend and compete for a championship, as they were 2 wins away from this year, which really surprised all of us except for Keith. But I think it was just time for the Dolphins to completely blow it up. That's why they released Tyreek Hill. They've now traded Jaylen Waddle. They moved on from Tua Tagovailoa, who's now a member of the Atlanta Falcons. And so it all makes sense. And this trade didn't surprise me as much as the Maxx Crosby trade, which ultimately ended up not even happening. So that's the most interesting thing. That's going to do it for episode 185. But before we go, I wanted to get some final thoughts from Kevin and Keith. Kevin, go ahead.
So you mentioned with Malik Willis wanting to go over there for the court with the GM and the guys that kind of won it from day one. Just remind you guys, these were the same guys that took Jordan Love and had him sit behind the guy he was going to replace. So, yeah, maybe they're not going to start a CJ Carr, Jordan Love, or not Jordan Love, a Julian saying Arch Manning, but they can say, hey, we've seen it work before. So,
Kevin is cooking right now. Keith, you got some final thoughts?
This decision could come back to bite him because he's seen it firsthand how this happens.
I think it's interesting, the concept that what you see right now is a lot of the teams that are preparing to be bad next year. Like, obviously, the Jets are not going to be anywhere close to decent, and they're not giving up picks. They're stockpiling all these picks. Cleveland, we don't know what you're doing, Cleveland, but it is what it is. But a lot of these, like Kevin alluded to, a lot of GMs, a lot of scouts are banking on the concept that next year's draft class is going to be totally loaded. Moore will be there. I think Arch is going to be better next year, and he took a decent amount of steps at the end of last year. But Kevin brings up a good point, because if I'm the Dolphins and I know I'm going to be bad, why would I give Malik Willis all that money? I thought it was a good deal if they were going to keep Waddle and go after some pieces. They're not doing that. They're blowing it up like we've all alluded to. So I'm giving Malik Willis all this money when I could just suck next year regardless and have that contract off the books, and then I'd be free to get a rookie contract on one of those quarterbacks. The timeline is kind of not adding up. You say you want to rebuild, but then you throw a boatload of cash at Malik Willis. I don't know what they're trying to do, maybe if they're going to blow the whole roster up, but it is an interesting concept because you see the bad teams that you know are going to be bad. They're not going anywhere near a quarterback in free agency or trading for him, and they're stockpiling those picks. And the Dolphins, they give Malik Willis $40 million guaranteed. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do, though.
My biggest takeaway from everything that Keith just said is that he very conveniently, Kevin, omitted Julian Sayin from the discussion about the quarterbacks who are going to be coming in.
I heard that too.
I didn't hear that guy's name.
Moore,
who is that guy?
Is
that the guy that got outplayed by Carson Beck in the Cotton Bowl?
Yeah. Sorry, we can't. Yeah, that 2 first-round draft picks off the edge.
Is that the guy that uses Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate as a life raft until he actually had to play someone decent?
I mean,
hey, Keith, how's JJ McCarthy doing?
Through for what?
He's awful.
45 yards.
Like I told you he was going to be.
Against us? 45 passing yards? He's supposed to be the next Jesus Christ.
Well, you guys are throwing out CJ Carr as like in this loaded draft class. I mean, you can't trust a Buckeye fan as a quarterback evaluator. You just can't do that.
But we have Tom Brady, so you have to trust us.
Hey, it's better than Troy Smith. All right, we'll just start throwing out guys so we can be here all day. We want to do this. We do it.
Top 10. Okay, he'll bounce back.
Terrell Pryor sends his regards.
Not the receiver.
I was about to. That's exactly what I was about to say. Oh man,
don't do
that. The biggest thing that the end of this podcast today made me realize is that I made such a mistake by not having Keith join us sooner during college football season, because that would have made for some entertaining content. So we'll have to circle back to that about 6 months from now when college football season gets underway, because I was gonna throw shade with Sharon Moore, but like that situation is just so sad that I'm not even gonna joke about it.
All charges in a court of law.
Good for him.
Money talks.
Innocent until proven guilty, so good for him, I guess. But that whole situation was just awful, and it's so awful that 2 Buckeyes fans don't even want to make fun of the Michigan man for it. But with that, that's going to do it for episode 185 of Stats Over Politics. Make sure to give us a like on YouTube. It helps us a lot. And if you enjoy the podcast, hit subscribe to get notifications when we go live. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Stats Over Politics, and on X at Stats or Politics. See all the great content Kevin's putting out there. And make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on all podcast platforms. If you're enjoying the show, please give us those 5 stars. We'd really appreciate it, as you guys have been tuned in to episode number 185 of Stats Over Politics. For my guys, Jaevon Toddy, Kevin Dent, Kaz Johnson, Alex Dent, Keith Jouganatos, and Gary Singh. I've been your host, Sean Holko. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week on another episode of Stats Over Politics.
Peace. My laptop is fixed. Clips are